An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure every time. Get a company set up so that they can prevent something from happening. I would much rather do that and take fewer fees just to prevent it, because the emotional impact to the victims is underestimated.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. Today's guest may have the longest job description of any, or job title of any guest we've had so far. So we're being joined by Clay Kniepmann from Anders here. He is the Forensic Valuation and Litigation Principal. So very excited to have Clay on the show, and of course joined by Jody as always. So Clay, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background and kind of tell everybody about you?
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the show. We think the more words you add to the title, the smarter it makes you look. So,
So what's your problem?
Self out as an expert, right? As you mentioned, Clay Kniepmann, I'm a principal in our in Anders Forensic Valuation and Litigation practice. My practice area mainly focuses on the litigation and forensic side. So I do a lot of fraud investigation work, and then a lot of expert witness testimony work and litigation consulting. And so that's usually will come into play when there's a damage measurement, like lost profits or something like that. So we do a lot of commercial litigation, and then we also do a lot of family law work as well. So, whenever there are monetary disputes that come up in divorce cases, which is pretty much every divorce case, potential there as well.
Hey, so Clay, kind of backing up there a little bit here. So, folks who aren't real familiar with someone here's forensic accounting, they probably think what CSI, a TV show there, meet spreadsheets kind of. How would you describe exactly what you do in plain terms? So you go in and you do what?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know, the Accountant 2 just came out, right? And the Accountant 1, it's a forensic accountant. So I always say it's exactly like that, but sub out all the guns and intrigue, analysis and a lot of reading reports and things like that. No, each case is different. So that's really what I enjoy about it. It's kind of, you're putting the puzzle together for each different case, depending on the facts and circumstances of that case. So in investigation, the first thing we do is we'll sit down with whoever the hiring party is, and that's oftentimes the business owner or one of the business leaders. Find out everything they know, or at least the important stuff that they know, and that's going to give us a tip on where to start our analysis. So there's no template, no rinse and repeat on that. It's figured out each time, depending on the facts of the case and then what data they have available. That'll kind of point you in the right direction. And from there on, it's think on your toes.
Yeah. So knowing our audience right now, marketing agency owners, many are running, a real lean shop, they trust their team tremendously. Where do you typically see them getting into trouble financially?
You just listed two of the biggest red flags. So that we get in the fraud investigation side anyway. Mm-hmm. So you said first, lean shop. Lean shops can tend to prevent you from, having in place a lot of internal controls. You're having one person, sometimes one person is your office manager. They have access to all of your accounting records. They have access to the bank account, signing authority. They can essentially do whatever they want and show you whatever they want. And trust is the worst internal control that there is. The thing is, what we see a lot, especially with the size of clients and the types of clients that we work with, it's smaller businesses that are kind of developing into those medium-sized businesses and then into larger businesses. And when you're a small business, you're hustling, right? You're trying to figure out how to make this thing work, how to bring money in. You're not necessarily focused on hanging that process up with internal controls and things like that. So setting that system up kind of tends to be an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And that's when we see people fall into the trap. And we always hear the question, what could I have done differently? Why didn't I think of this? And you don't think about it until something happens. Maybe it won't. Hopefully it doesn't, but it can, so that's kind of it.
How do you get that balance though? How do you get the balance between trust and controls? Because you can go one way and or the other way, and it brings everything to a halt.
Yep, absolutely. And in fact, exactly what you said. The only way to completely prevent fraud is to not transact a single dollar, right? So, I mean, that's the only way to eliminate all the risk.
It was over.
Exactly. So, yeah, if we recommended that, I don't think we get hired very often. So it's a delicate balance. There are schools of thought that have mathematical formulas on that risk approach. I tend not to believe in those mathematical approaches too much, just because you have to make big assumptions in those mathematical approaches in order for them to work. And who knows if your assumption's right. So, if your risk tolerance is, okay, I'm willing to risk $1 million loss so that I can do X. Well, what's the percentage of likelihood that loss is going to occur? You don't know. And so it's a gut feel thing. It's a balance thing, and a bit up to the business owner. The only thing that I always hate to see is somebody wishing that they could have done more. And really, some of those minimal steps, just having somebody else that doesn't have access to the bank records, that doesn't have access to the accounting system, just having them do the bank reconciliation, just that second set of eyes might be enough to prevent what could have been a major fraud loss. So it's something for business owners to consider. But yeah, you can't go overboard either, or you're going to, stymie your business so much that you're more worried about the internal controls than what you're focused on in running the business.
So that's definitely one great control. And I grew up when I graduated college, I think 2 years later, SOX started coming out. And so I was in that SOX world where, again, I think a lot of companies were going to that extreme. They were like, making their business so control focused that they weren't worried about running their business. So I'd love to hear, that's a great tip, is have someone different do your bank recs, have a second set of eyes in there. What other couple tips do you have for the small agency that's maybe like 5 million and has 40 employees? What other tips should they have in place outside of just their bank accounts to make sure that they're under control?
Yeah, there are all the canned kind of internal controls, and it's, go back to college and think of like the segregation of duties, the simple, like, don't have one person, handle the cash and have them have access to your accounting records. The problem with those is they really aren't customized, and I don't think they're terribly valuable. If they were going in to do a risk assessment, we want to understand how your business operates and how you just kind of put your fraudster hat on. How would you steal? As best as you can think of all of those ways, and then come up with simple steps that aren't going to interrupt as much as you can, that aren't going to interrupt the business process, that could prevent it, or at least make somebody think twice that they may get caught. So it's got to be tailored, in my opinion, to each company. And oftentimes the people that run the business are the people with the most knowledge in that area. It's just taking that minute, to think about, hey, what if somebody did want to steal?
So partly would be maybe even just asking yourself as an owner or a COO, if I was going to commit fraud on this company, what steps would I take? Right. Like that might be the question, because they know it the best and they really understand, like, this is the way to do it. The one example I always use is I worked for a government contractor for a long time, and it was all estimate to complete revenue. And we had auditors come in who like look at our cash transactions and spend so much time on that. I'm like, where the fraud in this company is I can add $10 million of revenue tomorrow by changing 1% of our estimate to complete. And like, you guys aren't even looking at that stuff. And I knew that because I was in the operations, I was in the processes. And so like, I knew like where the fraud risk was. And so that's when, as a controller, that's where I put my controls in place. And so I think sometimes the person that's there understands where those fraud risks are. So that might be the best place to start.
100%. And if you think about from that auditor's perspective, one of the reasons they don't want to look at that percentage of completion is because they don't know how to measure it, right? They don't know how complete a project is.
Right.
The person in the trenches does. So yeah, that's exactly it. And you mentioned, Sarbanes-Oxley, and everybody kind of wanted to follow that model, especially after, the Enrons of the world and all of that happened. Yep. But you have to remember, those are all designed for publicly traded companies,
right?
That are the largest of the large mature companies. And it's just not realistic for, small business owners at all.
Right. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, without naming names, kind of talking about the end run here, I'm sure you've had situations with maybe creative agencies or some professional service firms where something really went sideways, whether it's embezzlement, fraud, whatever. It's totally caught leadership off guard. Could you give us a quick story of what happened and maybe how they could have actually prevented it?
Oh man, so many stories. And professional services firms, fraud can happen at any company. All professional services firms, including accounting firms. So, we have to be aware of it even internally at our firm. But one of the most painful stories that comes to mind right off the bat is it was a professional services firm, and I'll leave it at that level now. It was two individuals who broke off from a larger professional services firm to start their own thing. One person was the go out and get business person, the face of the company, and the operations person. The other person was more of the back office, accounting, making sure we're compliant with everything we need to comply with person. But there was that wall in between those two roles, and 10 years later, come to find out that, hey, when I ask for reports, there's always a delay. They don't want to show me certain things. The numbers keep changing. So all those red flags start to go off, and investigation ensues. And it turns out that the person who was running the books of records had been stealing from the company that they started for a matter of like 13 years. And the only reason we ran into just a data limitation issue. So when you do these fraud investigations, if you talk about going back 10 years, even going to have bank statements back that far. So unless you have been religiously filing those away and have them, hard copies of them, you run out of runway, right? So even the very first bank statement, the earliest bank statement that we had access to showed signs of theft. And in that case, it was some of the most simple stuff that you can think of, just using the company credit card for personal purchases. By far the most common thing that we see. A lot of times I think when you hear forensic, you think of kind of this cooking the books, really creative, and the percentage of completion would be a creative way to steal and misstate your books. More often than not, it's the simplest thing. It's taking cash out of the bank, writing checks to yourself, writing 2 payroll checks to yourself, things like that we see a lot. So it doesn't have to be complicated. If you have the ability to conceal that, in that case, what the bookkeeper was doing and alter the expenses to something that looked like it was business related. So if you have that ability to cover it up, hide it, and ability to control it, that's all it takes, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that I'm curious where you talked about those red flags. So as a business owner, if you're working with a partner or you have a bookkeeper, or you have, like you said, and just an office manager, what are some of those red flags that might make you, again, not trust them less, because you should always have a little bit of skepticism there, but make you kind of ask more questions or possibly look into some things yourself? What are some of the red flags that you would want to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I think always look out for if people are too kind of controlling of their little area, right? If they don't want to share, if it takes a long time to get reports and get transparent information, that sends up a red flag for me. I know from ACFE statistics, which is the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners, another big one is look for changes in personal life. Is there a need? Unfortunately, a lot of times if somebody has a relative that's sick, all of a sudden they need money to pay for things like that. But it could be anything, gambling addiction, things like that. The other thing to look out for is, just living a lifestyle that doesn't necessarily match with what you think the typical lifestyle would be for someone's salary range. So those are just some examples, and there are many, but give a handful.
Great. So now let's kind of turn the page here. So you kind of talked about, essentially your job really is a problem solver, right? Like you go in, you have the conversation with people, and then you kind of figure out the next step and where you need to look. So I'd love to kind of hear some of those next steps, right? So again, obviously reviewing bank transactions and bank codes, but like what does that process look like, and what would it feel like as someone that, okay, I'm suspicious of fraud happening in my company because of one of those things you mentioned. Maybe my office manager she pulled up with a $200,000 car in the parking lot tomorrow, or yesterday. Like that might make me a little suspicious. And so what would that feel like if someone hired someone like you, and what would those next steps kind of look like after that initial interview?
Yeah, I guess before we get into like once we're hired. So the thing that I don't want to sound like we're talking ourselves out of business sometimes, but
right.
The first thing we want somebody who is considering hiring us to think about is, if we find a significant amount of theft, what's your plan? What's your goal of this engagement? Because the last thing we want to do is go in and conduct an investigation, and find that there was money stolen, send another bill for our services, and that's a double whammy. And then they don't know what they want to do. They just want to fire the person and move on, So you have to kind of think about the end goal at the very beginning, and that'll kind of dictate the steps that you take. So if in the hard part about that a lot of times for business owners is, well, I don't know what I want to do unless I know the volume that's been stolen. If they stole $100, I might slap them on the wrist. If they stole 1,000, I might fire them. If they stole 50,000, well, I might want to take that to the prosecuting authorities. You don't know what you're going to find until you get into the weeds. And so the first step that we typically take is, and I'll just kind of use a standard fraud investigation example rather than, damage calculation, whole different world.
Right. Yeah.
In a typical fraud investigation, we will typically ask for access to the accounting system, if we can get it. If we can't, we'll ask for, general ledgers, preferably in electronic format so that we can work with it right away. But if we can't, we have software that'll convert that relatively quickly now. That has come a long way since I started in forensic accounting. It used to be literally keying in every transaction. Now it's software, OCR, a lot of AI assisted, gets it into a usable format pretty quickly. The next thing we'll do is, I like to start with the cash account, because the cash account, we can go out and get bank records, bank statements, and credit card statements from an external third party that we know that's the gospel, right? That we know that those are correct. Compare that to what's in the system to see whether we can trust what's in the system, first of all, because you guys know as well as anybody, you can put whatever you want into QuickBooks, whatever you want. You can make journal entries that make no sense, and we see that a lot. So you want to know, can I even rely on this data? And then if I can't, does that tell me anything, right? Does that tell me does it seem like it was an intentional manipulation of the system, or does it look more like just sloppy record keeping, which we see as well? So those are some of the first steps. And the other thing that we always do, and this is a tip for, I guess, the business owners who might be listening, is we'll run a audit history report. In that case that I was mentioning earlier, we ran that audit history report. The owner that hired us was complaining that there were delays on delivery of financial information. And she finally got it. And I forget the exact date, but it was November. And it was the Monday. So we look at the audit transaction, the audit report out of QuickBooks, which shows every transaction entered and who entered it, if you're using separate logins and doing that appropriately. And while they were averaging something around 15 transactions a day, over that weekend, the Saturday and Sunday, we're up at like 350.
Oh, wow.
Changes in QuickBooks leading up. So that tells you right there, that person's going in over the weekend, making all these changes, late at night, things like that. So that audit history report can tell a story as well. They're kind of wonky to read, so I'll caution people on that. But it can tell you a lot. And the key is make sure it's turned on, because you can turn that off.
I am curious about the technology in this area. So I think with like my credit card, right? Like if it can suspect, fraudulent transactions, like even like, the apps I have on my phone to track my kids speeding, like it can tell like, okay, they're on their phone too much, stuff like that. Like how is the technology, again, outside of like after the fact technology, is there more preventative technology out there where you can like add a system to your QuickBooks, or you can add a product to your SAP and it looks for certain things and like identifies your fraud risk each month? Is there those type of apps out there yet?
I sure wish there was. Do you see that coming down the pike, especially
I would think so, yeah.
with all the changes we're seeing with artificial intelligence? And it is right now, I'm not aware of a product that does that real time. But man, if anything's set up for it, it's the AI products that are that are great at identifying patterns and then flagging anomalies. One simple step you could consider taking is just having positive pay with your bank, and that's just going to confirm that all of your checks match the payees that you're entering the system that you provide to them. Just to kind of keep an eye on it. The key is you want to prevent it, but if it does occur, you want to find it as quickly as possible. Right? So yeah, unfortunately, that I am aware of, there's no just canned product that's going to look for those anomalies. And part of the tricky part is every company, an anomaly to one company is an ordinary business transaction to the next.
True.
You really have to have.
You would think even like audit firms would be investing in this, right? Like if audit firms would be like, okay, our audit would be way easier if we could just add this product to your financial system and it would tell us the areas to look at. You could like push a couple buttons and say, okay, this is a company that has a lot of late night transactions, so we're not worried about that. But what we are worried about is more than you can kind of like set the criteria and it would just look at it. You would think that some audit firms would be investing in that to make their audit a lot easier.
Yeah. And there are products that do that. When the audit firm comes in, though, they're looking at the prior year, right?
Yeah, right.
There are systems that do that, any number of them. That some are as simple as Excel add-ins. And,
right. That's what we used to do. Yeah.
Specialized products. I know IDEA for the longest time was
we used IDEA. Yeah.
Yeah. Great data analysis tool too. And those are the types of things that if we're coming in to do an investigation, usually when we're hired, something's already happened. We're coming in looking at past transactions. Yeah. But I do love that idea of, man, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure every time. Get a company set up so that they can prevent something from happening. I would much rather do that and take fewer fees, just to prevent it, because the emotional impact to the victims is underestimated for sure.
Yeah, we're kind of adding to that a little bit and kind of backing up a little bit on that also is that we a lot of our agencies have, they're pretty much in the cloud. I'd say 100% or majority of them, payroll, books, time tracking, you name it. They're up there. Are there any other risks that you can see that are involved because they're in the cloud versus not being in the cloud? And if there are, how would you figure that, how to take care of that or how to limit that?
Yeah, I think it actually cuts both ways. I think while there may be some additional risks of, security breaches, things like that, that can happen whether you're in the cloud or whether, you're on a desktop version. When you're on the cloud system and assuming you have your all of your access set up appropriately, it also gives you the ability to log in anytime and take a look. A lot of times it's just as simple as looking at it with kind of that fraud hat on, like looking for that late night transaction, because that's a really simple analytic to run, right? If you know, like, hey, I suspect somebody might be coming in late at night and doing something, real easy filter to look at all the evening transactions, weekend transactions. You want to make sure it's based on when it's entered into the system, not the date that is associated with the transaction, because again, you can manipulate that.
No, yeah, this This has all been fascinating, and I think the way Jody started the interview is exactly what a lot of people think about when they hear the word forensic, right? It's like, okay, this is the exciting part of accounting, which it definitely is. Like I remember my audit days. Like my favorite part was getting the list of all the transactions and running like stats reports on it and doing all that. So I think this is definitely the fun part of the accounting world, which you're lucky enough to be part of. But at this point, we're at the let's talk about something more interesting. So you mentioned the movie The Accountant and the sequel coming out. I'd love to kind of hear, and again, this is always a fun topic here, is what is something that you've watched recently? Let's kind of stick to like the action genre or maybe the horror genre, some action or horror you've watched recently that you've enjoyed. And so I'm going to start with Jody because Clay, I can tell you're thinking, but I think Jody always has a pretty quick answer to these type of questions. So Jody, action, something you've watched recently that really been drawn you in.
Something that's really drawn me in. Pause me on that a second. Go to yours. I'm gonna look up the exact name. I don't want to get the name of it wrong here.
He's pulled up his Netflix account. So Clay, what about you?
Oh man, lately, so I've got 2 young children, 9 and 5.
Okay.
So a lot of times when I go to the movies now, it's the Minecraft movie or it's the latest princess movie that comes out. TV wise, I've been watching The Last of Us, and I don't know if you guys.
That's exactly what. Boo, boo.
Same answer here. Okay.
So I played the first game when I was younger and had more free time. And so I kind of knew what was going to happen that season, and then started the second season not knowing what was coming. And no spoilers, but
wait a minute here. That's a video game? That's off a video game?
Oh yeah. The entire thing is based off a video game.
Oh, I did not know that. That is a spoiler. Interesting.
I have to get you the video game now.
Oh, okay. Well, you got me on that one.
So do you have another one? Is that your answer?
That was my answer. I am, lately it's kind of funny because I've been really wrapped up, not into movies, but into sports with the Florida Panthers going to the championship again. And now the Pacers are 3 games to 1 against the Knicks at the point of this recording here. So that's going to be interesting to see if they make it to the finals. So that's where most of my time has been, outside of every Sunday waiting for the new show to pop up there on the last one.
Yeah, some nights are the shows, but every night's the sport. This time of year is great for sports.
Yeah. So. I'd say the first 2 games of the Pacers series was kind of like an action movie anyway. So I'll go.
Big time it was.
I'll give you that answer. And it's been fun for me as a basketball person that's somewhat obsessed with basketball to watch those games, even though my Celtics are out. So for me, like the best time to watch movies is on the plane. And I've been to quite a bit of trips in the past month. And so the one that really stands out to me, which maybe it's an interesting movie, but it's Heretic, and it's the one with Hugh Grant. It's the horror movie, and that's me just like made you think. Like the whole time I was watching, like what's gonna happen next, and how's this going? And it was just a really interesting one to watch. And again, it was a horror movie, but there was one I was watching on the plane, and I was like with my daughter because she loves horror movies. Like you have to watch this one. It's so interesting. And so that was the one that's like Heretic, yeah.
I'm gonna have to put it on my list for sure.
Yeah. It has somewhat of a religious tone, so like you might want to avoid it if you're highly religious. But like the overall theme of it was pretty interesting. So, yeah.
Are you a big horror fan then?
Yeah. So it's funny. My daughter is a huge horror fan, and so like that's something she and I connect on, and we're always looking for the next horror movie. And she's drawn me into some where I'm like, oh, that was tough.
Yeah.
I'm a horror guy, not a gore guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a horror movie fan as well. My wife can't.
Same.
It's just
my wife won't do it either.
Well, yeah,
my wife is the same way. There's absolutely no way she'd watch a horror movie.
And my son, not so much either. And he's 15. He's like, nah, that's not my thing. And so my daughter's 17, and she's totally into it. So she and I will once a month go find something to go watch. So.
Oh yeah, when my kids were 4, I think they're 4 and 5 or 3 and 5, or they were pretty young. And a lot of times I would fall asleep watching TV and then go into the bedroom and finally go to sleep. And I did that one night. So I fell asleep watching TV in the bedroom. We wake up in the next morning and we come in and both kids are huddled together on the couch watching Scream.
Oh, jeez.
And we're like, oh, what kind of bad parents are? That is their favorite horror story by anyway. They can't wait for the next one to come out. They were just together. I remember wrapped up on the couch like, oh my gosh. And we're like, oh no. Watching the slasher movie.
If you're looking for a horror movie too, I thought the Nosferatu remake was really good.
Okay.
What's that one? Nosferatu?
Nosferatu. Yeah, it's a remake of kind of the classic vampire movie.
Oh, I
So,
love vampire movies.
I
Okay,
thought it was really well done.
that's a
Okay,
definite.
I'll check that one out. Yep. Cool. Well, thanks for playing along with my game here. So it's in the last minutes here. Let's kind of go through final thoughts. And so, Jody, we'll start with you and then throw it over to you, Clay. So, Jody, what were your final thoughts based on this discussion?
I would like to nix the final thought thing, and I would like to just get one tip that an agency owner could walk away with today, implement tomorrow that could prevent or help prevent fraud from happening. I want to hear that one big golden nugget you've got there for us.
Yeah, well, we touched on it earlier that trust, while necessary to an extent, is a horrible internal control, but also don't assume that somebody else is watching for fraud in your company. So even if you're getting an audit done, I think a lot of people fall into the trap that, hey, this audit is going to catch anything that could potentially happen. And they're really not designed to do that. It's so that your financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with GAAP to a reasonable degree, of materiality, right? So I think people think just because they have hired an accountant, whether that's a tax accountant or an auditor, that they're going to be on the lookout for that.
Or even a CFO.
Exactly. So it's really incumbent on the business owner to kind of take some ownership of that and think about what could happen, assess those internal controls. You don't have to get crazy with it, as we mentioned earlier, but just an ounce of prevention. It doesn't take a lot to get people to think about it. Also, if I had to do one single thing, fraud hotline tip, it is the number one way by far that fraud is uncovered. Employee whistleblowers, vendor whistleblowers, things like that. It always hovered. The percentage always changes every time they do a study, but it always hovers around 50% of cases are discovered that way.
Interesting.
Whereas in external audit, you're talking more like 4 or 5%.
Yeah, as we've gone through this conversation, the one thing I keep thinking about is one of the things we do when we onboard a client is we go through and we document all their processes, we make recommendations, and a lot of times they're control recommendations. And the amount of interest from the owners this is probably the smallest amount of interest of the owners when we go into an onboarding. They're like, oh, that's not for me. That's for my controller. That's for my accountant. This is stuff I don't really care about. But that's something that people should think about. What are my processes? What are my controls? Are they documented? Do I make sure I have at least a couple of controls in place for each of these processes to make sure that I'm preventing fraud? And again, it's interesting the disconnect in what you're talking about and the risk and how it could just draw your business, and not bad things that can happen, and the interest we see from owners is completely disconnected. So that's kind of what I was thinking about throughout this entire conversation.
Yeah, I see the same thing, right? It's always viewed as these small steps. They're viewed as inhibiting your ability to do business smoothly. Yep. But just think about, would you hand this person your personal checkbook and just trust them?
Yeah.
Because that's really what you're doing. If you're the business owner, ultimately that's your money. That's great. So
definitely. Awesome. Well, I think this is a great episode, and I loved hearing more about the details. You always hear the word forensic accounting, but it's nice to hear the details. And I think for a small business owner, obviously there's a lot that hopefully they can take away from this, and they can change their business tomorrow and make. And again, if you're out there and you have some of those red flags that popped up, I think Clay's your guy. Reach out to him and see if he can help you out there. So make sure that might be the next steps for you.
Yeah, and Clay, how would they find you? I mean, how would they get a hold of you if they're suspecting anything like this?
Email, phone. My phone number, it's listed right on the website. Email as well, or you can reach out to the Anders front desk, and they'll put you in touch. And to your point, even if it's just a suspicion, we're always happy to have a conversation and give you some ideas. So don't think just because you pick up the phone, it's going to be a big bill or anything like that. We want to help you. So that's really the major message. And guys, thanks so much for having me. We should do it again sometime and talk movies.
Yeah, for sure. Have all movie episode. Yeah. A movie or sports episode. Yeah.
I'm sure audience would love that, by the way.
They would. Yeah.
Accountants make the best movie critics. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I don't know if you can go back and listen. We have done some of the holidays. We will do movie drafts where we'll bring some of the podcasters on, and we've done a horror movie draft. We've done Christmas movie draft, and I think one of these years we'll probably do a romance movie for Valentine's Day. So we've done that a couple times, and those are my most fun podcasts. So definitely check those out.
For sure.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks. We'll put your information in the show notes as well, so people can reach out to you. But thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, and of course, Clay's part of the team here at Anders. So if you're already working with us or thinking about it, just let one of the CFOs know, and we'd be happy to get them connected to Clay.
Love that.
Thanks, Clay.